everyone, I'm JoltKing627, and today I'm going to be giving you a comprehensive guide on how to build Retalicons. Let's get right into it. Full disclaimer, modification of blasters is simply put a risk. There is the possibility that your modification will cause the blaster to break. I am not responsible for you breaking your blaster, however unfortunate that may be. With that out of the way, let's get on to the guide. So for those who don't already know, a Retalicon is when you take the old reverse plunger poopy internals that are found in the Recon and replace them with nice direct plunger internals that are found in the Recon Mark II and Retaliator. The purpose of this being to be able to get the superior performance of a Retaliator out of the shell of a Recon, which you may or may not prefer the colors of. I personally am a huge fan of N-Strike Yellow. Alright, here's a rundown of the sections of this mod guide and how they are supposed to be used. Section 1 and Section 2 will explain how to use stock Retaliator and stock Recon Mark II internals, respectively. They will explain what parts you need and all of that except for the spring rests. In Section 3, we will explain the spring rests and what options you have there. Section 4 will cover reinforcements to the shell that are necessary for a spring load above 5 kilograms. Section 5 is firing demonstrations along with closing thoughts. If you desire to use worker aftermarket materials instead of scrapping a Retaliator or Recon Mark II, the process is the same as outlined in Sections 1 and 2, just substituting the equivalent worker replacement parts for the stock internals. We will not be covering worker expanded plunger tubes in this video, that's for another time. If you want to go ahead and pause the video right now, I will have timestamps for all of those sections right on screen, so that you can find them should you need to and easily fast forward. With that out of the way, let's get into the guide. Section 1. Retaliator internals. Step 1 is going to be disassembling your Retaliator. In this case, I had to put all the parts back into a painted shell as I have not had a stock Retaliator for a very long time. Alright, now that we're in, we're going to be able to take out some parts. First of all, we got to take out that main spring. We are going to need that. And then we're obviously going to need the catch mechanism. That is crucial. We will need the plunger tube and the plunger rod. Those are also very important. The bolt sled and breech assembly is also something we're going to need, but we're not going to need that double prime lock, so we're going to go ahead and remove it. Alright, with that done, we can put that to the side and we can get to work on the barrel lug and the dart tooth assembly, which we will be needing. So we can go ahead and unscrew that little piece there that keeps the dart tooth in. And we can get rid of that, we don't need that. And we can take the dart tooth and its spring out, and we can also then unscrew, if there are screws, and take out the entire barrel lug and dart tooth assembly, as we will be needing it. Everything else in the Retaliator we will not be needing. We do not need any of the locks. To be clear, these are the parts that we will be needing. Alright, step 2 is going to be disassembling and gutting our Recon. In this case, a very nice, clear Recon. Okay, so now that we're in, we can basically take out almost everything. All we need are the dart tooth holder, the trigger, the mag release assembly, and the jam door. As far as modifications to the internals go, not much is needed. All you have to do is remove the ring that normally goes around the back of that plunger tube, as it interferes with the shell. You can use a variety of tools to do this. You can use knives, Dremel, pliers, even a flathead screwdriver could probably do it with enough effort. No matter how you do it, it just has to go. The only other modification besides that is you need to install a pin in the lower right-hand corner of the plunger tube. You can use a pin from the bolt sled of the old Recon or even the old Retaliator's jam door. Doesn't matter, it just has to make sure it's in the right place. Alright, now we can reassemble this blaster. So first of all, we're going to install the dart tooth and dart gate assembly, which you'll have to put in at the same time. Make sure that you get the dart tooth in correctly and that the spring is resting where it should. And make sure to screw down the little holder thing for the dart tooth to make sure it doesn't come out or do stupid things, because that would be bad. Now we can go ahead and install the plunger tube assembly. So that's going to be the bolt sled and breech with the plunger tube and its pin, and also the plunger rod. Now we kind of got to put them all kind of together, as you can see, and make sure that they all fit properly together. and then we can just slot it right into the shell, making sure to line up the peg on the slide with the holes in the bolt sled. And then we can just kind of line everything up, make sure that the pin goes in its proper place in the little right between the ribs of the shell. After that, we can install our catch with its spring and make sure it hasn't lost its spring. That can happen. And then we can install our main spring, in this case a stock Retaliator spring. Slip it right over the plunger rod, and then put in our spring rest of choice, in this case my carved wooden one. And that's about it. We can now go ahead and completely reassemble our blaster, making sure that the pin is still in its proper place between the ribs of the shell. And just make sure that you get all of the screws back in their proper holes. Also, make sure to back thread if you're using a clear recon like this. You don't want to strip out those poor screw posts. Once you got it all back together, you can go ahead and give it a test fire. And sure enough, it works. We're done. Section 2, Recon Mark II internals. Okay, first up, we're going to want to take apart our Recon Mark II and strip it for its internals. We'll need the spring, although I will be swapping out for a stock Retaliator spring. We'll need the catch. We will need the plunger tube and plunger rod. We will also need the bolt sled and breech, as well as the dart gate and the dart tooth. That should be all we need, and here is everything on screen. Next, we're going to need to make some modifications to the internals. First of all, we need to put the pin in the plunger tube and remove this little back cap piece. Luckily on this one, it's using clips, so you can just snap it right off. The pin position is in that bottom corner right there. You can probably use the jam door pin from the Recon Mark II, but since that's plastic, I went ahead and used one from the bin. Now, lastly, you're going to need to make a little bit of modification to the dart tooth. The ridge up on top there is actually a little bit too tall to work. You need to slim it down a little bit and take it from about 2.3 millimeters to 1.7 millimeters. Finally, we're going to have to remove the double prime lock from here. Unfortunately, since the Recon is cheap, they use one-way clips to get it in, so instead of trying to undo those, we're just going to go ahead and cut through the back there once on each side, and that will just immediately free up the little spring and let the lock fall out, and we can just discard that. We won't be needing it. Now we can go ahead and disassemble our Sonic Recon, and we can gut basically all of the internals out. We don't need that main spring. We will not need the catch. We will not need any of those locks in there. We can just get rid of those. We will be needing the trigger. We won't need the plunger tube, we won't need the breech or the bolt sled. We also won't need the barrel lug or the dart tooth. We can get rid of those, but we need the stopper piece that keeps the dart tooth in place, as well as all three of those screws. Now we can finally go ahead and assemble our blaster. We're going to start with the dart gate, barrel lug, and the dart tooth. We've got those. You got to put them in at once, otherwise they don't like going in. And then you've got the little locking piece, and you can screw all those down and make sure to put the spring in there. Now we can go ahead and get out our plunger system with the bolt sled and such, and we can slide it on there, making sure the little peg on the slide goes into the hole on the bolt sled. We can just position everything properly, push the bolt sled forward, and then we can mess with our plunger tube and get it into alignment. We got to make sure that pin is between the ridges. Then we can add our catch in the proper place, and put all the random other parts back in, and add our spring and our choice of spring rest. You should now be able to put the shell back together. I had a piece pop out, so we'll just fast forward to when I fixed that. And now we can put the screws back in. Remember to back thread if you're using one of these nice clear shells so you don't destroy those poor screw posts. And that should be about it. Back together now, we can go ahead and give it a test prime and fire, and sure enough, it works just fine. Section 3, Spring Rests. So there are any number of ways you can create a spring rest for your Retalicon. I have seen it done with a 3D printed piece, which I will link in the description box below. I've seen it done even with a shuttlecock, apparently. You can also do it with a plate, like I've created here for my clear and Sonic Green Retalicons, but there is one way that really stuck out to me as the best you can do. This technique is one I learned from Horace Rogue, and it is the one that has worked the best out of all of the spring rests that I have ever tried. Essentially, you are cutting up the original Recon's plunger tube, for its back end here, because the inside diameter is basically perfect for retaliator springs, and the outside fits perfectly into the back cap. Now, making one of these is stupidly simple. All you have to do is drill a hole in the back of the plunger tube that is large enough for your plunger rod to fit through, but not large enough for your spring to fit through. And then you obviously need to cut the tube. Now, the spring is going to want to go in this direction. This part of it acts as a guide for the spring, and that's why this works so well. So you have basically no rattling around, and everything stays where it needs to be. Now, behind this piece, you're going to have some form of spacer, which you can make out of more of this Recon plunger tube, or you can use 1/2-inch PVC. And this basically decides where your spring rest is going to sit. So if this piece is longer, you are going to have more pre-compression, because the spring rest is going to be moving farther in this direction. And if you make it shorter, you can have less pre-compression, or potentially go with a longer spring like I have done here. As you can see, this spring is a wee bit longer than the Retaliator stock spring. Installation is even easier. All you have to do, drop your spacer into the back cap, drop your spring rest, put your spring in there, and literally just slide it on. And you're done. So not only is this the most reliable spring rest that I have tried, but it also is the most versatile, as you can basically make it to fit whatever spring you're wanting to use. Out of all the spring rest options, this is going to be the one that I'd recommend the highest. It doesn't require you to have a 3D printer, and it uses parts you already have, because it's the Recon plunger tube that you just took out of the blaster. And it works very, very, very well. Section 4. Reinforcements for use with stock plunger tube on higher spring loads. So the pin design that we used in parts 1 and 2 is pretty great. However, on anything stronger than a stock spring load to about 5 kilograms, you're going to want reinforcement, otherwise it is just going to snap the little rib of the shell right out. So what we're going to do is reinforce it with hot glue and screws in that center slot right there, where there normally on the Retaliator would be a stopper. This is going to interact with the two little nubs on the plunger tube in combination with our already existing pin design. As you can see, I have already done this side of the shell. I have a screw going through the front there, along with a whole bunch of hot glue, however leaving spaces for those little nubs. The hot glue, being a little bit rubbery, will act as a shock absorber, and that screw in the front will stop it from being pushed out the front. Now I'm going to show you how to do this as I do the other side of the shell. We're going to start off by placing our plunger tube in the shell, lining it up where it's supposed to go so that we can use a Sharpie marker to mark down where the little nubs are supposed to go. That way we can plan our hot gluing accordingly. Now we're going to take our knife and make a little prick on the taller front piece there so we can drill a hole through it with our nice power drill so that we can put a screw through there. Now it's time for our hot glue. Right here we have one of the locks from the actual original Recon, and we can use this to space our hot glue and make sure it doesn't get in the way of those little nubs on the plunger tube. We can just stick that in the slot and it will block off the hot glue. When the glue dries, we can remove those locks, and now we have a nice squared edge that will perfectly butt up against where those little nubs go. We just repeat the process with the help of a slightly cut down version of the same lock to do the other middle part there. Then I went ahead and filled these other little recesses with hot glue, making sure not to get hot glue above the line of the plastic ribbing, just for extra reinforcement. With all that done, now we can go ahead and test fit our plunger tube, and sure enough, it fits just fine. That's it. We have now successfully reinforced the shell, and we can put the blaster all of the way back together. Fast forward, and now we've got all the screws in, and we can give it a nice test fire. Put in our mag, close the breech, and sure enough, works just fine, but now it's reinforced. Now for Section 5, a firing demonstration of a bunch of Retalicons, as well as a stock Recon for comparison, and my final thoughts. Alright, first up, we have a completely stock Recon. Pretty awful, huh? Now let's try this Sonic Retalicon, which has stock level internals. Much better! And now a clear Retalicon with the same internals. And finally, a yellow Retalicon. This is a high-powered full-length one. It's got a worker full-length reach in it. Should hit about 100 FPS. Whole lot better. Alright, we've had our firing demonstration. Now it is time for my closing thoughts. This has definitely been a long-term project. I've been working on it off and on for about a year now. Hopefully over that year I have compiled enough information to make this guide as comprehensive as I possibly can. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my friends VileMods, GSP, and Grim Reaper 2458. Without them, this video would not have been possible in the slightest. I genuinely appreciate all the help y'all gave me to make this possible. Anyway, that's all I got for you. Make sure to let me know in the comments below what you thought of this guide. Remember to like and subscribe, and thank you all for watching.